All right, we're just gonna be watching videos that are important to me that I think I could learn something from and you can learn something from. And it's good to just get a refresher at the beginning of every season. Or before the start of any season, I should say.
There are 85 different edits in Fortnite and thousands of different scenarios you'll find yourself in, where in a fraction of a second you need to choose the best peak. But really, all peaks, even obscure ones, even ones where you're halfway stuck underground, can be classified within these 5 categories: reaction, top side, bottom side, right side, and ping. Right side is the easiest, most recognizable one. It's your standard right hand peak on, say, a window or around a wall. Because Fortnite's camera is on the right side of your character, you're able to see and shoot around the right side of things before you would be able to on the left side. Pretty simple. Now, top side is probably the worst peak. Even though it's often risky and hard to pull off, when used correctly it does allow you to hit max damage shots without return damage. The best example of this is the half wall. If an enemy is pressed all the way up against the half wall, you're able to see their head before you're visible to them. We think of the camera as being centered around your head. When you look up, your head stays in the center. But it's not centered around the top of your head, it's really closer to being centered around your mouth. So the top half of the enemy's head can be entirely visible and they still won't be able to shoot us until their mouth is visible. But this is exactly why this peak is one of the weakest. Technically, this peak does give you an advantage, but if they're a little bit too high, you're shot. If they jump, you're shot. Conversely, bottom side is the safest category of peaks, but it's often hard to implement. Since the camera's pivot point is around your mouth, that means there's a tiny bit of your head that can show with a top side peak, but their entire body can be visible with a bottom side peak before they're able to shoot you. As long as you're further away from the wall, this kind of peak gives you a great advantage. They can't crouch under it, they can't jump out of it because they'll still have to land, and if they start backing up, there's enough time for you to back up in response before you're visible, unlike with the top side. The problems are: 1, there's no edit that just cuts off the bottom of a wall like this. It would be great, but usually you have to use an edit that isn't exactly what you're looking for, like a bottom right edit, or find unique situations where this can be applied. The second problem is that you can only hit body shots with this peak. Sometimes this isn't a problem at all, but sometimes you really need to go for a headshot to end a fight immediately. But if both you and the opponent are on low health, this is perfect. You can get the elim with just a body shot anyway, so you can go for it with less risk of losing if your movement's a bit off. Now, reaction peaks, if you can even call them peaks at all, are just making both you and the opponent completely visible to each other. You really only do this if you think your opponent won't be able to react and shoot you before you close the edit. Like if your opponent isn't looking in your direction, or they have out their builds, or their shotguns on cooldown, you get the picture. The idea is that they won't be able to take a shot at you at all, so might as well just open the edit as wide as possible so you have the easiest time hitting for as much damage as possible. Finally, the ping category isn't really separate from the other peaks. You don't choose a right hand peak or a ping peak. The ping category is always a factor in every peak, even if you play on 0 ping. Because in an ideal world, as soon as you move around a wall, your opponent would see you and be able to shoot you. But in reality, because there is latency between you and the opponent, you're both really seeing after images of where each other were. The moment you move around the corner, the opponent won't actually see it until say 70 milliseconds later, or however much latency is between you two. And the faster you move, the more this effect is exaggerated. This is also why you can run around a wall or reset a wall, and sometimes still get hit. They shot you while you were still visible to them on their screen. It just took time for that information to reach your computer. This effect is actually called Peeker's Advantage, but I'm calling it the ping category because I feel like it's confusing to call a category Peeker's Advantage when the whole video is about getting advantages from peeking, but those advantages from peeking are different from Peeker's Advantage, and so, never mind. The point is, you want to be the one moving into the peak as fast as possible, because if the opponent is moving into the peak and you're standing still, or even worse moving away from the peak, the opponent is going to have the advantage regardless of which edit you choose to make. For example, if you make a window edit but stand still at it and your opponent swings into the peak, because of ping, they will still be able to shoot you first, even though you have the better angle. You might not think this will matter as much for you depending on your ping, but it matters both what yours and your opponent's ping is, and nobody has actual zero ping even if the client tells you that you do. If it was a LAN and everyone had zero ping, this wouldn't be the case, but it's basically impossible for this to happen. Even Fortnite's in-person events that we call LANs aren't real LANs where everyone's computers are wired to each other, giving each other zero ping. All the computers still connect to the normal servers through the internet. So you should always be taking advantage of ping with your peaks, but to decide which peaks to prioritize, the order goes reaction, bottom side, right side, then lastly top side. Sometimes bottom side and right side can swap places if you need to go for a headshot, but usually bottom side comes first. Reaction peaks make it the easiest to deal the most damage, so if they can't shoot you back, do that. Bottom side gives you the strongest angle advantage and is therefore the safest, but right side is still pretty safe and allows you to hit headshots. Finally, top side is such a weak angle that it's rarely the best option, but rarely is still more than never. Now, let's look at some actual examples on how you would choose which peaks to use in a fight. First, the most common situation, box to box, you just took their wall and they're trying to hide behind their cone. Well, they clearly know we're here and they're holding out their shotgun, so we can't reaction check them. And we can't make a bottom side peek since it requires you to be further away from the peak than them. If they're hiding all the way in the back, you can't use it. So that leaves us with the right side peak. And the wall edits that have a right side peak are windows, bottom right, top right, a 4-tile edit, and a left wall, and a half left wall. Look, I'm running out of names here, okay? If anybody can come up with something better, let me know. But anyway, against most of these edits, the opponent can still hide behind their cone. Windows, they can hide. Bottom right, still nope. The only ones that give you an angle are the top right and the left wall, but the left wall has so little health that the enemy can just shoot it with any shotgun to break the wall and take it back. So that's why the top right edit is usually used here. Everyone knows that's the edit they use in this situation, but it's important to know how you arrive at that conclusion. Now we can apply that to progressively more complex situations, like this one. Same situation, except they're at the front, moving left to right. And let's say you have traded damage once already, you hit them for 100 and they hit you for 50. Actually pause and think about what you would do here. Well, again, they're ready to shoot, we can't reaction check them, so we look at bottom side edits. This time we can use bottom side because they're close to the wall. Now the only bottom side edits are bottom right and bottom left. And yes, the bottom right edit is both a bottom side and a right side peek. Some edits can be in multiple categories depending on how you're using them. But here, both bottom right and bottom left work as long as you're opening the side opposite of where they are and moving into the peak. If they're on your left, do the bottom right edit and swing right. If they're on your right, do the opposite. Okay, now here's the last one. This one actually happened to me in game and I'm letting you know it's tricky. You're really gonna have to think outside the box for this one.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
So yeah, I was low on mats, storm was on us, so I tried to disengage and get sniped midair. So now I'm boxed up, pretty much out of mats, low on health in storm, but the opponent is also low health, seemingly low on mats, and is instead trying to move back and forth around my box looking for a shot when I open. What should I do? Well, can't reaction peek, and they're halfway underground, so the bottom right and bottom left edits won't work as bottom side peeks, because their head would be where their legs normally are. However, wall edits aren't the only way to get bottom side peeks. If I instead edit the floor and cone out of the way, I've made a bottom side peek where I can shoot their lower body. This is why it's important to know the why behind the edits you make, because in real games you're not always perfectly between tiles or on flat ground. Sometimes you're in a building with weird walls that won't let you place builds. Sometimes you're fighting along the edge of a cliff, and sometimes the ground is just slanted. But knowing the why allows you to more easily adapt to various situations. So you want to fight? You know, sometimes in life it isn't about what the outcome was. What's important is that I VOD reviewed and learned from the past to become a better version of myself for the future. So you died. Yeah, I tried to do a right side peek instead and then panicked when it wasn't working. Anyway, you won't always have to go through this whole checklist in your head. You instead build a mental flowchart that grows over time. The flowchart starts simple with stuff like the first example. If they're hiding behind their cone, you do a top right. Then you add to it. If they're right up against your wall, bottom right or bottom left. Once you get to all the situations that occur commonly, eventually you get all the way out to when the ground is slanted and other obscure situations. Knowing how to figure out the right option in each scenario is the key to building the right habits into your flowchart. Even if you made the mistake in-game already, it's important for you to be able to identify what the correction should be after the fact. Because if you don't, you'll do the same mistake the next time and build bad habits. And once you build a bad habit, it's much harder to change it than learning it properly in the first place. It's like people who, even though they've told themselves 100 times not to, will die because they jumped into a box with no advantage at all. Regardless of if you realize it or not, you already have your own mental flowchart. But when you look at your own gameplay, you should ask yourself if your flowchart is a good one or if you need to make some changes. Your flowchart is why you play how you play. Your flowchart is your playstyle. When you see an opponent trying to rebox, what is your instinct to do? Not everyone's flowchart is supposed to look exactly the same. Different people will have different playstyles. But there's a difference between having a different playstyle and making mistakes. Choosing to make a window edit instead of a top right can be a differing playstyle. But if you instead choose to open the wall completely and just hope you hit harder, not so much. Hopefully this makes it more clear how you can know which edits to make. Remember the 4 types of peaks and always utilize peeker's advantage. To help, I also just added an option to my advanced peeking v3 so that now you can practice peeks while factoring in peeker's advantage. Just set the delay to how much ping you want the enemy guard to simulate. Against the 30 ping enemy, put 30.
At Harbor Freight, we do business differently from the other guys. We design and test our own tools.
Rebuilding is the best way to improve your mechanics, but over the past week I noticed my builds have gotten pretty repetitive and I felt like I wasn't improving. Something Polarized recommends doing to improve this is watching and replicating what pros do, so I copied 4 free builds from pro players to learn new moves. Starting with the build from Polarized, this was pretty simple to replicate since it consisted mainly of triple edits up and down. One move to take away from the free build is his cone flip. While it looks like it's just for flash, it actually has purpose in fights. If you're running in one direction and you see an opponent's claim to your tops, they can get a free shot before you're able to escape. The only thing you could do to protect yourself is edit the cone and get out the box, so you want to practice getting comfortable with reset and editing your tiles. Another variation is to flip a stair then edit out the box. This is super easy to practice and something you should be able to do in case you find yourself in that situation. If not, it at least makes for added difficulty in free builds. Something important to note when copying pros free builds is to pay attention and replicate how they move their crosshair. When Polarized edits, there's little wasted movement and he's connecting all of his edits. One thing I saw across all his free builds was the way he edited this wall. For me, it's habit to edit towards the left on 4 tiles, but Polarized edits towards the center, making for less crosshair travel between editing the wall and stair. So when practicing this build, I made sure to mimic the same crosshair movements, which made hitting edits a lot easier. As advanced as this looked, this was one of the easiest builds to replicate since there were only 2 moves that weren't triple edits. First being the side jump into editing up to the side. When doing this move, try to place the high walls before catching yourself, that way you have the piece control in case the player is up there. This challenged my movement and edits by changing the direction and forcing me to edit from a different angle. On the right side going left I have no issue, but on the left side going right, the movement and edits feel awkward to me, which is something I have to continue to work on. The second move is just jumping over a PM bar into a stair and wall edit. It's not the most functional edit, but it's seen in a lot of pro free builds and it's still good for adding variety and difficulty to your builds. Out of the 4 free builds, this free build has 2 moves I use the most. First is his cone edit 180. There's a couple of different ways you could do this, but in this clip, Braids edits the front 2 tiles. He didn't do it in this clip, but in fights, after editing the cone up, you also want to cone it, that way if a player runs up, they're cut off and you can edit on them. An easier variation of this is to edit the back 2 tiles, turning the cone into a ramp. That way if the player runs into it, you don't also have to cone them to cut off their path. In this clip, I was able to catch the player on the cone, box them, and get a free kill. One thing I noticed when watching Braids do this move was just like Polar edited the wall to the center, I still had the habit of editing towards the left, which forced me to mouse reset in order to hit this 180 and edit the cone because of how far my crosshair had to travel as opposed to just editing to the center. It seems like pros always have their crosshairs centered and ready to hit their next edit, so that's something I started to keep in mind when free building. The second move is the side jump. I use this the most when fighting because it requires no setup and you can make a variety of moves from this position. All you have to do is place a wall to your right and front, then jump on the stair and block your head with the cone. If you didn't have anything protecting your head prior to this, you'll have to place this lower wall before placing the other 2. When I first tried to do this move, I would either end up under the stair or placing a floor above my head, so to prevent this, you want to make sure you stay to the left side of the stair, then once you land on the stair, make sure you're looking down to place the cone. When in a build fight, you may be worried about your top being exposed before placing a cone, so to prevent that, you could do a more advanced version where you place a cone on top of the walls, then land on the ramp, that way you're blocking your tops ahead of time, preventing any damage from above.
Playing Minecraft. Oh, okay.
Opposite of the last free build, this one was more of a pattern, making it easy to remember and replicate. After a few triple edits up and down, it's high walls, cone 90, protected side jump, cone 90, cone flip, then cone 90. The cone 90 is one of the simplest and safest ways to gain elevation or change direction, making it useful for in-game scenarios. All you have to do is edit the cone above you, place a wall, cone your top, then edit and reset the cone in the direction you want to go. You could also use a stair instead of a cone if that makes it easier. The protected side jump is another simple build where all you have to do is edit the back tile of your floor, then place a wall to prevent getting pieced or shot from your side. While in the air, place a wall in front of you, then catch yourself with a floor, and while looking down, place a stair to block your head and back. To make it easier, you could just place a cone to place the wall through that, but it might cause you to get blocked. While the more advanced version would be to place the cone on top of your wall, then catch yourself to prevent getting hit if the opponent is 2 or more levels above you. The last move is just side jumping in the high walls. High walls are the easiest and most effective way to piece control players. Here he edited his cone and floor, then high walled in front and to the left. Doing this allows him to control more area and allow him to move and piece control from different angles. When I first started to copy these builds, I found myself messing up a lot. There were a lot of moves I had to learn while also trying to break bad crosshair habits. While it was frustrating at first, I knew once I finally learned it, my mechanics would be better. Making mistakes and doing things outside your comfort zone is the key to improvement. Just make sure you're actually learning from your mistakes as opposed to doing the same thing over and over. When copying pro free builds, the main thing you should focus on is learning new things. Especially at beginner level, you don't need to focus on copying the free build one-on-one. My edit speed isn't the best and I got hung up on a lot of the quad edits. If I wanted to increase my edit speed, I could have continued to do them until I wasn't messing up, but my goal was to learn new moves. So I just replaced the cone with a stair, making it easier for me to go through while still being able to perform those moves. I know on high ping some of these moves are more difficult, so it may be beneficial to eliminate some of the unnecessary edits and just focus on the move itself. After copying these 4 free builds, I definitely saw improvement in my crosshair placement and edit speed and was able to add a lot of variety to my free builds.
This is what Ivy League universities you can get into with a 3.6 GPA.
The new movement is complicated, but just like when mantling and tactical sprint were added, you're going to have to learn to use it sooner or later. Learning the new movement allows you to get better piece control, take height, and even crank 90s much faster than before. And if you instead try to just ignore it like nothing changed, then you'll just keep messing up your side jumps since you don't know how the ledge jump works. So to start, let's look at what was added. There were 4 new movements added at the start of the chapter: ledge jump, roll landing, wall kick, and wall climb. Ledge jump uses a burst of stamina to give you a boosted jump that goes both further and higher than normal. High enough in fact that you can place a floor under yourself to get up a full layer with one jump. There's no separate keybind for this. Ledge jumps automatically happen when the game detects you jumping off what it thinks is a ledge, and it uses ledge very liberally. This is a ledge. this is a ledge. Even this counts as a ledge. Pretty much anywhere the angle of decline increases is considered a ledge, but this is not considered a ledge. It doesn't care how far down you're gonna fall when considering what's a ledge. So even though you'll fall much further jumping down some backwards ramps, those are not considered ledges because the angle of decline doesn't change. But you do have to be pretty close to the ledge for the ledge jump to activate. If you jump too early, it won't count. You have to be right on the edge. Like when it comes to side jumps, the reason you sometimes ledge jump and sometimes don't is based on how close you are to the edge when you jump. Most of the time, it'll ledge jump unless you intentionally jump earlier so that you prevent it. The easiest way to make sure you don't accidentally ledge jump when you don't want to is to wait to sprint. Ledge jump will only activate after you've been sprinting for long enough, so if you wait until right before the jump to press sprint, then you'll still get the higher jump from sprinting without it ledge jumping. However, you should actually be trying the ledge jump as much as possible when doing side jumps, for one reason only. Not because of the height increase, but because ledge jumps can animation cancel pulling out your shotgun. Normally when you sprint jump, you have to wait for your shotgun to pull back out before you can shoot, but if you take out your gun before you ledge jump, then releasing the sprint key instantly allows you to shoot, no pull-out delay. So every time you do this on a side jump, you can take a shot at your opponent before you build the walls and catch yourself. But there are a ton of other applications for this. Being able to cancel your pull-out animation is insanely powerful. Like when you get double edits on someone, they'll usually be holding their gun out waiting to take a shot at you, and it's a hard angle to get right without taking any return damage. But instead, you can now just edit, shoot, and reset before they can even react, since you can negate your pull-out timer entirely. The only way they'll be able to hit you is if they perfectly time a pre-fire. You can even use this when taking someone's wall. If there's a cone in your box and no floor above you, you can ledge jump off the cone as you make a wide edit, instantly shoot and reset without any pull-out delay. It's not easy to do, but if you get consistent at it, it's really powerful. And all of this tech is just from one of the 4 new movement mechanics. Next up is wall scramble or wall climb. When you jump in the air with momentum and are facing a wall you're next to, you can press jump again to run up the wall for a bit. It runs up the exact same distance every time. It doesn't matter if you short press or long press jump, it'll do the entire animation unless you cancel it by either pressing jump again or by placing a build or editing. Just like with mantling, you can't shoot while wall climbing, but unlike mantling, you can build and edit, automatically canceling the wall climb, which is great. That way you don't have to worry about getting locked into an animation and dying because of it. You can also move left and right quite a bit during the wall climb, but the direction you climb isn't determined by which button you're holding, but just the momentum your character already has. So if I jump straight up and then start holding right just before starting the wall climb, I won't move to the right much at all. But if I have momentum towards the right and then try to swap directions before wall climbing, I'll just keep going in the direction my momentum was already in. Either way, after you wall climb, your character goes into a kind of waiting animation. That's because after your wall climb, you're allowed another jump. You can either jump up, go to the sides, or jump back. To go left or right, just hold that direction and press jump. But to go up, you don't look up like you would think. You have to be looking at the wall and holding forward when you jump in order to jump up. If you look up or down or somewhere else, or even aren't holding forward, it'll default to just jumping backwards off the wall instead. And more often than not, you'll be trying to use that second jump to go upwards, not to the sides or backwards. The most annoying thing that you'll run into using wall climb is that it's always trying to make you mantle at the end of it. Normally when you get near a mantle point, you have to press jump again to initiate the mantle, unless of course you change that option in your settings. But if you're climbing a wall and get close enough to a mantle point, it'll automatically mantle even if you aren't holding jump as long as you're holding forward. And this is regardless of which options you choose in your settings. But in order to do the jump at the end of the climb, you have to be holding forward and press jump. So then how do you jump at the end of the climb instead of mantling? You have to hold either left or right at the same time as forward. Or if you have analog movement, the angle just has to be more than 38 degrees and less than 67. If it's less than 38 degrees, it'll make you mantle, and if it's more than 67, it'll make you do the side dash instead of jumping up. Hey, editing Sly here. So in the last patch, they actually secretly changed how this works. It no longer cares what direction you're pressing, it only cares what direction you're looking. If you're looking at the wall, it will make you mantle no matter what. So now if you want to jump at the end of the climb, you have to look to the side and hold towards the wall when you jump. But everything else is the same. Now back to the video. The alternative to a wall climb is the wall kick. If you're in the air next to the wall and you look to the side instead of looking directly at the wall, or you hold away from the wall, you'll kick off of it instead of trying to climb it. But unlike wall climb, wall kick doesn't put away your weapon, so you can still shoot, build, and edit however you want. The wall kick, while not costing any stamina, does pause your stamina from regenerating. On the other hand, wall climb ignores your stamina completely. It can still regen while you're wall climbing. But the best part comes from combining both wall kicks and the wall climb. Normally, it only lets you wall kick 3 times in a row before hitting the ground, but the wall climb partially refreshes the wall kick, so it gives you 2 more. So you can wall kick 3 times, then wall climb, and then wall kick 2 more times. Or you can wall kick twice, then wall climb, and then wall kick 3 more times. Either combo will give you enough height to get all the way up to 5 tiles off the ground. The last new movement mechanic is roll landing. It's pretty simple actually compared to the others. When falling from either a ledge jump or more than one tile high, you can press jump right before you land to do a roll. This one's kinda useless compared to the others, to be honest. I mean, it gives you a bit of stamina back and it makes your hitbox smaller for a bit, but that's about it. You can't even change directions with it. Rather than rolling in the direction that you're trying to go in, it always rolls in the direction that your momentum is in. And it even puts your gun away, unlike sliding where you can at least still shoot. So I see very few scenarios where roll landing is actually that useful. But with the other three, there's a ton you can do with them, like negating fall damage. In previous seasons, there would be no way to drop down from here without building or items of some sort. But now you can space out all of your aerial movement to keep resetting momentum on your way down to prevent fall damage. But you can't use wall kicks or wall climb if you have too much downward momentum, so you have to space them all out properly. It won't lock you out of doing wall kicks until you have enough momentum to take fall damage, which is falling from anything more than 3 tiles high. So you want to wall kick just before falling down 3 tiles, then wall kick again, but instead of going for a third wall kick, instead go for the wall climb. This is because it will lock you out of wall climb as soon as you have pretty much any downward momentum. And if you did a third wall kick, you wouldn't be close enough to the other wall to wall climb it until you already had too much momentum. So kick, then climb, and then immediately cancel it. Then fall and kick 3 more times. That's just about the best you can do to slow your descent. This movement also changes what's the fastest way to take height. For the longest time, 90s had always been the fastest, as on each layer you can use the floor and stair to push yourself up and gain more elevation that way. Then when tactical sprint was added, sprint 90s became the fastest. But there's a new king in town, multiple new kings actually. The technically new fastest way to gain height is to just use the wall climb mechanic. If you're against the wall and press jump 3 times in a row, it'll jump, start the wall climb, and instantly jump again, essentially making a high jump. Then when you're in the air, place a high wall and then a floor to catch yourself, and then repeat. And then if you want to be more connected, you can just place a stair before you place the floor, and then you pretty much have the same build arrangement as 90s, but without the turning. So I guess they would be called zeros? Whatever they're called, the best part about them is that they're really simple compared to the later techniques in this video. The only problem is that the only way to press jump 3 times in a row fast enough to do the high jump is by having scroll wheel jump. Even trying double or triple jump binds, I wasn't able to do it consistently. I mean, I could do it, but much slower than using scroll wheel jump. And scroll wheel is already being used for reset and pickup. Plus, not everyone has a scroll wheel. It's debatable whether or not it's even worth it to give up something like scroll wheel pickup just for this, especially when there are other options that are almost as fast. For example, this ledge jump wall climb combo. You ledge jump off a cone, then place high walls before wall climbing as high as possible, and jumping again before placing a stair and floor to catch yourself. The benefit of these is that you never have to look away from the opponent you're building towards. You're always protected from that direction, and because this one uses ledge jump, you can take a shot at the opponent each time you do it. But there are 2 big downsides. First, you can't do it if you don't have stamina. The second is you're only held up by 1 wall unless you do one of the 2 more connected versions. So when comparing the 2 different ways of making this more connected, you'll likely find one of them easier than the other depending on your input method and the settings you play with. For the first one, after you start sprinting, hold this backwards cone edit until after you do the ledge jump off the cone. Then release the edit and turn around to place a wall before doing your wall climb. Then complete the rest normally, and there will be 2 layers of builds that they have to chop to break you out. But if you have trouble holding this edit or turning around quickly, you can connect it the second way. For this one, after you start sprinting, start to edit the cone into a normal stair, but hold it and only release it after you ledge jump off the cone. Then rotate your stair twice to place a backwards ramp before wall climbing. Then during the wall climb, rotate the stair back so that you can finish the rest normally. I feel like the first one is easier, but the second one allows you to never have to take your eyes off the opponent. Neither of them are particularly easy, but with practice they're doable. With this, you can take height faster than you could with sprint 90s while having the same number of layers holding you up and giving you more opportunities to shoot your opponents. But doing zeros is even faster than the ledge jump combo, plus you can do them infinitely. You can't ledge jump more than 4 times in a row, but you can do the zeros without stamina. Even if you have no stamina and are fully jump fatigued, zeros work the exact same. I'm still coming up with other new techniques, but these techniques are some of the first things you'll want to learn with the new movement. The more you use the new movements, the more you'll start to understand them and be able to use them on the fly in fights and in-games. The best way to practice new movements like this is to do it in slow motion first, and then slowly increase the speed until you have it down at normal speed or even faster. To practice at different game speeds, you can use my new free build map. It also allows you to practice with or without jump fatigue, infinite energy, etc. The code will be in the description, but the easiest way to find it is to
This is Rochelle, who gives you a shot. Rebecca is there when you feel not.
If I asked you which of these paths will get you from point A to point B the fastest, which would you choose? Assuming you have no mobility items, nothing like that, just your normal movement. Well, the correct answer is actually path 3. Simply put, it's because it has the most elevation change. But to really understand why path 3 is the fastest, you have to completely understand how player movement works in Fortnite. So in this video, I'll teach you exactly that. Everything about player movement and thus how to get around the map faster. Because while mobility items change almost every update, your normal movement is always the same, and you have to make hundreds of decisions a game about how to rotate. Knowing how it works can save you seconds each time that add up to minutes throughout the game. The first thing to note is that running up elevation is faster than running on flat ground. Their horizontal speed is the same, but that means you have to be moving faster when going up elevation for them to be the same. You run 5.5 meters per second on flat ground, so when you're running up a 45-degree incline, you're actually running 7.8 meters per second, or about 41% faster. You might say, well, that doesn't really matter if it's not in the direction you want to go, but all of that extra vertical distance can be converted into horizontal distance with the next topic, sliding. But first, you might have noticed that my ping is lower than usual. That's because I started using Gear Up Booster, a network optimizer that both reduces ping and eliminates packet loss. It works by analyzing the path your packets take to the server and changing it to a more optimal path. I tested another video. But back to sliding. When it comes to sliding to gain speed, you don't just want to slide all the way down. Sliding downhill doesn't actually help you gain speed. The falling down is what's giving you the speed. The only thing sliding does is stop your momentum from being halted. If you aren't sliding, it doesn't matter how much momentum you have, as soon as you land it goes straight to zero. So anytime you land with momentum, you have to slide if you want to keep it. But the longer you slide, the more momentum you're losing. You should instead be jumping instantly upon landing. This does 3 things. It keeps you in the air and falling for as much time as possible to keep gaining momentum. The slide stops your momentum from resetting. And the jump converts the downward momentum into forward momentum. When you normally jump, regardless of terrain, you jump straight upwards. But when you jump from a slide, instead of jumping straight upwards, you instead jump perpendicular to the surface. So on flat ground, that means straight up. But if you're sliding down, it changes your jump angle so that jumping actually propels you forward. If you compare just sliding to slide jumping over any decline, there's about a 50% increase in horizontal speed with slide jumping. So that's how you can gain insane amounts of momentum from slide jumping down an incline. Sometimes too much. Gotta be careful not to do too much and die to fall damage. But what about jump fatigue? Jump fatigue typically doesn't apply on declines even if you always jump as soon as you hit the ground because of how jump fatigue is tracked. It doesn't care about how long you're on the ground, it only cares about how often you're jumping. When on flat ground, after just 2 jumps, you're tired, so the 3rd jump will both not jump as high and slow your movement speed. But if you space the jumps out even just a little, then you're able to avoid jump fatigue. So when slide jumping downhill, because it takes longer to hit the ground each time, your jumps are naturally more spaced out, avoiding jump fatigue. But that also means when going uphill, you shouldn't slide or jump for speed. As a matter of fact, you shouldn't do it on flat ground either. I often see players running around the map and sprint jumping to try and get around faster, but it's actually just slower. Yes, the sprint jump is slightly faster than just sprinting, but it takes so much more of your stamina that you run out faster, and in the long run it slows you down. On flat ground, sprinting and jumping is faster than normal running, but just sprinting alone is even faster. But the fastest way is to do a single sprint jump, then slide and b-hop twice to conserve the momentum from the sprint jump as much as possible while using less stamina than running the whole way. Not only is this the fastest way to move around, but it also allows you to take other actions while moving. So you can pop heals, farm objects, build, or shoot people around you while still moving at maximum speed. Now the best part comes from combining all of this information. If you know that going down hills increases your speed, and that you can refarm while running at full speed, then if you're already say at max wood, it's just a net gain to use ramps to gain speed if you're running through a forest or somewhere with extra wood around. Yeah, it's more work, but building this habit just flat out increases your movement speed for free. You just sprint jump, then place a backwards ramp to slide and jump off of. Then you keep the momentum with another slide jump. During the 2nd and 3rd slide jumps is when you can farm objects around you to get the materials back that you just spent. Just look at how much faster I'm able to make this rotate than if I hadn't built anything. And if you're in an area where the ground is weirdly between grid tiles and the ramps don't want to place right, you can place a forward ramp first to connect the backwards ramp to. Now I'm not saying to always do this. You know you still need to stay aware and adapt based on the situation. But it's good to have the option where you just need to get from point A to point B as fast as possible. Now I'm not going to go into how to move the fastest with every mobility item possible because we'd be here all day. Plus it'll probably just change again next chapter. But in general, you just want to use slide jumps to keep momentum as much as possible. For example, with the grapplers now, it's better to grapple downward and keep slide jumping than to just grapple forward. The same was true of nitro rings, shockwaves, etc. So in the next chapter's mobility has us flying out of cannons or who knows what else. Just remember to try and conserve the momentum as much as possible. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Farewell.
A lot of people ask us, what's the difference between mudwater and mushroom coffee?
Hi,
my name is Khadijah, and a little thing I love about the Chick-fil-A Grilled Spicy Deluxe Sandwich is that kick of...
If you want to know how to not die to rats, you've got to know how to think like one. And let's be honest, everyone has to be a rat sometimes. Whether it's off spawn, in games, or fight gone bad, as soon as you run out of mats, what do? Exactly. So learn how to be a rat so that you can get that refresh you need, clutch some extra placement points, or just not get your game ruined by someone hiding in a bush. First, let's look at sounds. Every sound in Fortnite has a maximum auditory range that you can hear it from, and a maximum visual range where it will show on screen with visualized sound effects. I'm gonna assume that everyone has that on because most people do. You might think they're correlated somehow, but really they aren't. Some sounds are audible for more than double the visual range, but others show on visuals before you could ever hear them. The basics that everyone needs to know is footstep sounds. Normally, all of your movement is only audible or visible when within 35 meters of the enemy. It doesn't actually matter if you walk slow, fast, sprint, jump, or even mantle. Both the sound effects and the visuals have a hard cutoff at 35 meters. The only exception is sliding, which can be seen on visuals from even further away, all the way to 60 meters. So as long as you're over 35 meters away, you can move however you want, as long as you don't slide. But as soon as you're within that 35 meters, every single thing you do will make a sound and show on visuals. I mean everything. Even just turning your camera can make a sound. That little half step your character does when you turn, yeah, it shows on visuals. When you're within that 35 meters, you have to be crouched. Being crouched hides all your movement from visual audio, but your footsteps are still pretty audible. Turning while crouched though doesn't make your character take a step, so it's not audible like it is when standing. If there's nothing going on, they will for sure hear your footsteps when crouched, but if there are other sounds covering it up, you can pretty easily go unnoticed. But it's important to know that uncrouching for any reason will instantly show you on visuals, even if you're standing still. Just pressing uncrouch itself shows on visuals. I've seen people try to not get shown on visuals when dropping down by uncrouching and jumping before moving off the ledge, but it's just worse. The act of uncrouching, jumping, and landing will all show on visuals even if you don't move. The best way to drop down if you're trying to sneak on someone is to just stay crouched and walk off the ledge. If you're crouched before you fall, it won't show on visuals at all, and it only makes a tiny sound when you land that nobody will really notice unless they're listening for it. If you fall more than 1.5 tiles, the little sound will play that's super easy to hear. Now if you have to jump up while sneaking, there's nothing you can really do. You'll have to show on visuals to be able to jump up somewhere. Switching weapons has an even smaller audio range. Taking out most weapons or your blueprint can be heard starting from 21 meters away. It doesn't show on visuals at all though, and it isn't that loud, so it can easily be masked by other sounds. Of course there are some exceptions though, like taking out your pickaxe, or weirdly a flowberry has a larger range at 30 meters. Nitro Fist understandably had an even bigger range of 45. Now building on the other hand is super loud. Not in terms of range, as placing or editing a build can only be heard within 40 meters, it's just actually loud. At 40 meters, it goes from not being able to be heard at all to sounding like it's right behind you. And breaking build has an even longer range of up to 60 meters. Using this information, we now know the best way to start a fight with someone who's in the open and doesn't see you. Just run up as fast as possible until just before you're 35 meters away from them. At this point, if they're making sounds that can cover up your footsteps, you can crouch walk to get closer, but if not, 35 meters is the closest you can get, so just start shooting. But it's important to note that giving yourself the flowberry effect can be heard from up to 60 meters away. While you have the flowberry effect on, you radiate a sound that can be heard from only 30 meters away, but the sound for gaining or losing the effect can be heard from 60. Using the flowberry items themselves can't be heard from that far away, but gaining or losing the effect can. So if you already have the flow effect on, you have to keep applying it as you approach. But if you didn't already have it, you shouldn't apply it until after you start the fight. That's specifically for the flowberry effect though. It doesn't apply to other effects like peppers, which can only be heard from 20 meters. Even hop rocks and hop floppers count as separate effects and don't make the sound that flowberries do, even though they both are just low gravity. Funny enough, the two effects do stack, they just launch you when you jump. Now let's talk about bush camping. I know it seems super easy, oh you can just sit in the bush and then shoot them, but no, there is a right and wrong way to do it. When you're in a bush, it doesn't change anything about visual sound effects or much about the audio at all. If you move, you'll still be heard within the 35 meters, it just adds the bush sound on top of the sound that your character already made. So you absolutely have to be crouched and don't move when someone's approaching. When you're about to shoot someone, don't uncrouch beforehand to make it easier to hit the headshot. Just aim a bit upwards, because if you uncrouch before you shoot, they'll see that first on visuals before you shoot them, giving them that tiny bit more time to react. Because your goal isn't just to get a shot to start the fight, ideally you want to completely 200 to 0 them before they can even react. If you give them an extra 100 milliseconds or so to react, it might be the difference between them instantly dying or turning it into a long drawn out fight. But before you even get to this point, it's important what you do when you first enter the bush. First, don't slide into bushes. It damages them, so you might break the bush by accident if it was already damaged. Second, whenever you enter a bush, you want to take out your builds to see where the building grid lines up. This is so that when someone walks in, you can position yourself so that you're in the same box as them. When you shoot them, they'll instantly try to place builds between you. But if you're in the right position, there is nowhere they can place anything to protect themselves. You'll just be on the same side as their wall, making it a free kill. On the other hand, if you're the person walking into the bush and don't want this to happen to you, just shoot the bush. It doesn't matter how close you get to the bush or how hard you stare at it. If they're positioned in the bush well enough, you won't be able to see them. Even if you look at it from different angles or build above the bush to look from above, you still can't see them unless they're positioned badly. In this clip, I'm literally wearing a bright red skin and players right next to the bush can't see me. I know you don't want other people to hear you, but the small risk of someone hearing you from half a mile away, running over and knowing you're in that exact bush is way better than just going YOLO and hoping you don't instantly die. Just shoot the bush. And before you get close. You're not shooting the bush to try and deal high damage. You're never going to out-trade someone you can't see. You just want the numbers to pop up so that you know someone's in there and you can build to block them. Next, let's imagine your teammate died in a fight and now it's 2v1. You've decided you either want to get away entirely or surprise kill one of them. You already know you have to stay crouched the entire time, but there's other information you also need. If there is loot that you want to pick up, you can pick up as much as you want. The sound of picking up loot only plays on your client. Nobody else can hear it regardless of how close they are. However, dropping loot does make a sound. So if you try to just scroll wheel pick up everything, the leftovers will drop, making sound. If you want to pick up something silently, you have to make sure you're only picking up what you can hold. If you need to heal, most normal healing items have a visual range of 5 meters and an auditory range of 20 meters. So that goes for things like medkits, bandages, potions, and any food items. But because you don't eat flowberries, technically you pop them, they're heard from further up to 25 meters. Things you throw like chug splashes have a visual range of 25 meters and an auditory range of 30. Weirdly though, med mist have an insanely big range and can be heard up to 80 meters away. Using fizz is technically like potions and medkits that can only be heard from 20 meters away. But because it gives you the flow effect, you'll still be detectable within 60 meters. So basically, when trying to get away, you just need to get 35 meters away from them. Then you can fully run away and pop fizz once you're 60 meters away. If you're the one trying to find the player hiding in builds, you have two options. Search for them or pretend to leave. If you're gonna search for them, you wanna make sure that you're not making too much sound. If they move within 35 meters of you, you will be able to hear them as long as you're listening. If you and your teammate are both spraying through builds, you won't be able to hear them when they move around or try to sneak away. But if instead you're pickaxing through while crouch walking, it'll be much easier to hear where they are. Remember, as long as they're crouched, your visual audio is useless. You have to actually listen closely. But say it's a huge fight and it will just take way too long to search it, you're probably better off leaving. If you know where their teammate's reboot card is, you can drop a single bullet or material on the card and ping it. I've talked about this before, but if you hold ping, scroll to the second page and use the help ping, it'll be a ping that never expires. That way when you leave, as soon as the enemy runs over the reboot card, you'll see that ping disappear and know exactly where they are. Next up, in ratting 101, swantoning, also known as landing on someone. The flame hoops from Nitro season are perfect for this, as they only show in visuals within 35 meters, and they send you way further than 35 meters. But there are many other situations like this. Jumping down from a zipline or the floating island, or using shockwaves. Pretty much every season they add a new item that you can land on someone with. So anytime you're landing on someone, they'll be able to hear you falling once you're about 25 meters away from them. So if it's a slow effect like low grav that you're falling from, you'll want to shoot early before they build to block you. But with stuff like jumping through the hoops, you go so fast that they won't have time to react regardless. And once you get the first shot, just see if they panic or not. Sometimes players will react well and box up, armored wall, start healing. Other times, even if you barely hit them, they'll panic and just shoot the air and let you kill them for free. If they react well, you might just want to leave them alone and not commit resources to fighting them. But when they're clearly panicking, just keep pressuring them and they'll fold. If you're landing on someone from a launch pad instead, you'll want to delay pulling out your glider for as long as possible. Diving in the air can start to be heard from up to 90 meters away, but it's really not that loud until you get much closer. But pulling your glider immediately shows on visuals starting from 90 meters. So if you pull your glider at the last second, they might not notice you until you're right on top of them. You probably won't have enough time to get a shot on them unless they're really not paying attention, but it prevents them from shooting you before before you land on them. If instead you're pulling up in a car, it shows on visuals within 70 meters, but it can be heard from around 120. This is regardless of your speed or if you're boosting. Even if you're just idling, it'll show on visuals the same way. Now it's pretty hard to sneak up on someone in a car, but what you can do to hide from visuals is boost until just before 70 meters, then switch seats and just let the car roll up the rest of the way. You'll still be audible, but you won't show on visuals at all. And of course this will only work if there's an extra seat in the car. The last thing to mention is the sound of the gunshots. The vast majority of weapons can be heard and seen on visuals within 275 meters. For reference, this is what a 275 meter circle looks like on the map. Even weapons that aren't that loud, like bows, show from the same distance. The only weapon from this season that I could find that's different is Captain America's shield, which makes sense considering it doesn't actually shoot bullets. It instead can be heard from 100 meters away, but shows on visuals up to 140. And I know suppressors get a bad rap for being useless, but at least when it comes to hiding your position, they're still useless. Yeah, they don't actually reduce the range people can see your shots from at all. It reduces the auditory range down to 95 meters, but it still shows on visual audio all the way out to 275 meters like usual. So even for the one thing suppressors are supposed to be good at, they're still trash. Now I know I just threw a lot of information at you, so if you can't remember it all, just remember this. 35 meters is the range at which most of your actions will be detectable. If you're trying to hide, you have to stay crouched at all times, and always shoot bushes before you go in there. Here's a list for a bunch of other items I tested that didn't make it in the video. And by the way, the distances don't ignore vertical distance like a cylindrical range, they take into account verticality. So the ranges are like a sphere around the sound source. If you want to learn more about other concepts, you can check out one of these two videos.
Hey neighbor, you switched to T-Mobile home internet yet?
Regardless of if you're just starting out or are a tier 1 pro, this video will teach you things about Fortnite that I can guarantee you didn't know. Like the fact that you can build further in front of you by looking to the left instead of straight, or how cones and stairs, even when edited into the exact same shape, still behave completely differently. But in order to understand why these things happen, you must have a deeper understanding of how the building grid works. Even though there are 4 building pieces, there are only 3 slots where builds can be placed. Floors along one axis, walls along the other 2 axes, and either a cone or stair can go between the axes. But every time you build, Fortnite actually has to do a lot of guesswork to try and figure out where you want to place your build and in which orientation. The orientation is actually super simple. It completely ignores your position, where you're trying to build at, whether there are other builds in the way, and everything else. The only thing that determines the orientation of your builds is the compass. It's quite simply, if you're looking north, it will place facing north. But as soon as you cross the 45 degrees, it places facing east. Same thing at 135, 225, and 315. And the compass isn't visible in creative, but it's working the same way regardless. You can actually use the backbling in the battle pass though to see it when it's hidden. Now when it comes to which tile your builds are placed at, that's where it gets complicated. There's something called a raycast coming out of your camera at all times. It's basically a line in the direction you're looking, but it stops at a set distance. This raycast is the biggest part of how it decides where your build is placed. First, whichever build slot is closest to the endpoint of the raycast is where the build will place. Seems simple enough, but because Fortnite is third person and the camera is to the right of your character, the geometry works out that looking to the left allows you to build further away than looking straight forward. No one ever talks about this concept, even though they may utilize it in some ways all the time. If you notice people tarping, they always place the left wall before the right one. It's because you can place the left wall from further away than you can a right wall. But if you ask players why they do this, very few players can actually tell you. They'll say it just feels better. Which isn't wrong, but knowing why this happens allows you to use it in other scenarios as well. Like in mini build fights where you and an opponent are racing to get control of this build piece. If instead of looking forward you look more left, you can get the piece control from further away and before the opponent does. Or if you want to be able to pre-box either side of an opponent's box, you shouldn't stand right in the center. You should stand to the right side. You can build much further to the left, so if you stand in the middle, you won't be able to reach the right side from where you're standing. The next thing to know is if the raycast is colliding with another build, it reacts completely differently than if the raycast doesn't collide with anything. Once it collides with another build, then it only cares about where the raycast hits on that build. It's easier explained with this example. When I hold up my cone here, the raycast ends such that the build will be placed on top of the wall. But once there's a stair over me, now all that matters is whether I'm looking at the top or bottom half of the stair. If I look at the bottom half, nothing happens because it's trying to place on a tile that already has a stair. Here's another example using my favorite build, the U-ramp. When someone ramps over you normally, you just have to look above the halfway point on the ramp, which is here, and you're able to place a cone and floor above the ramp. But when someone U-ramps over you, you can't do the same thing. Because the halfway point on the U-ramp is just above the flat part, you can only build on top of it when looking at this part of it. But instead, you can look at the top half of a wall in front of you and accomplish the same thing. This mechanic is also why you can look straight down to place a wall in front of you when it's placing too far away. As soon as the raycast starts colliding with the floor you're standing on, it will place directly in front of you. The last step in determining where your build will ultimately place is what I like to call magnets, and it's pretty simple. If after all the other steps the build would have nothing to connect to, Fortnite tries to move it up or down one tile to something it can connect to. As you can imagine, this has many uses, but the most common is connecting the second height or any build below you. Normally you can't build that far down, but if there's nothing else to connect to, Fortnite will try to move the wall one extra tile down, allowing you to connect from further away. Another common use of magnets is placing cones into boxes from below. You could also use the mechanic of looking at the top half of a stair to get the cone in, but even if there's nothing below their box, the magnets mechanic will pull the cone up into the box anyway. Next, it's important to know the difference between the two pieces that occupy the same space, stairs and cones, because a lot of people think that this pre-edited cone would function the same way as a stair, but it doesn't in many situations. Yes, they have the same health, same basic shape, but for one, cones and stairs have different connection points. Think of connection points as the points the raycast use to figure out where is the closest. The connection point of a build is usually in the middle, but the connection point of a build doesn't change when you edit it. So the cone that's pre-edited into a stair has a lower connection point than a normal stair. This makes it so that you can build these cone stairs higher up than you can normal stairs, but you also can't build them as far down. The other difference, the most important difference, is that cones can be placed vertically through other builds. Why? I don't have a clue. But for some reason it was decided that cones can just ignore other builds on the vertical axis. So if there's a stair and floor above you, not a problem. If someone's in a tarp 2 layers below you, that's still not a problem if you pre-edit the cone. You can just build straight through the top of their tarp. But now that we've covered all the major points, there are a few other caveats to keep in mind. First, the same way you can build further when looking left because the camera is to your right applies vertically. You can build further by looking down because the camera is above your character. Lastly, I didn't get these set of rules from Fortnite's code or anything official. I am a programmer myself, so I can imagine how it may have been implemented, but I've never actually seen any of Fortnite's code. I created these set of rules to explain how I understand the building grid in a way that hopefully everyone can understand. This understanding of the building grid is what allows you to make use of advanced strategies like the ones in these videos. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new, and until next time, farewell.
New Dawn Power Sets traps, locks, and removes 99% of grease.
It's the better grease getter.
My favorite thing about ShipStation is that there are tons of...
You want to get better at fighting, so you ask around online and everyone says some variation of the same things. Just play safe angles, don't be too aggressive, but then you watch some streams of the pros and they're dropping high kill games, keying everyone in the cash cup, and it looks like they are not doing any of that. So what gives? Well, just playing safe is relative. What safe means for you may differ completely from what safe means to another player. When pros double pickaxe an opponent's wall, it's still safe for them because if the opponent tried to make an edit on them, they can react fast enough to edit up the cone and out of the box before the opponent can hit them. But if you aren't fast enough to do that consistently, then it isn't safe for you to do the exact same thing. Similarly, when you're able to closely watch the opponent, you can see when they have their blueprint out. When they do, it's fine to open wide peaks where you're exposed because their weapon won't be ready to shoot until after you've shot and reset the edit. But again, this is only safe if you're able to react and close the edit early if you notice them take out their shotgun before you do. The point is, there are a ton of variables that affect every fight you take and what safe means. Whenever you die, the answer for why you died isn't always should have played more defensive. In fact, it usually isn't, because playing safe is also dependent on time. Everyone knows the faster you can end fights, the better. If it's a stacked lobby and zone is about to move, sometimes the risk of dying from jumping in the box is less than the risk of the fight extending. If you know that not getting the zone in the next 20 seconds means you'll get lobby focused and die like 90% of the time, then at that point it's safer to jump in the box and force an aim duel to end the fight. Because if you play safe and the fight lasts 20 more seconds, you'll die to the lobby anyway. The same is true for some spawn fights. If you have a long drawn out spawn fight, sometimes forcing the aim duel to end it is the better option if you know a third party that has a full loadout is on the way to clean up the fight. If you imagine a line from passive to aggressive, all the way on the right would be phasing in every box you see. All the way on the left would be just sitting AFK in a box. Somewhere in the middle you have stuff like safe peeks from a 2x1 and pressuring their wall. You want to be as aggressive as possible, but there's a line you don't want to cross where aggressive becomes dangerous. You ideally want to be as close to the line as possible without crossing it. That way you end your fights as quickly as possible without taking damage. But where that line is depends both on the situation of the fight as well as your skill as a player. The better you get at protecting yourself when the opponent goes for shots, the further up that line goes and the more aggressive you can be without it being dangerous. Way too often when I see people comment on why they died, they'll say to themselves, I should have played more defensively. Sometimes that's true, but sometimes you just missed the edit and it got you killed. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have gone for it, it means you need to practice going for it more so that you don't mess it up when it counts. Of course, in a tournament is one thing, but when just practicing, that's when you should be pushing your limits and risk dying so that you improve from your mistakes. But instead of saying I shouldn't have been next to their wall, say I need to get faster at editing my cone. Shameless plug, but I do have a map specifically designed for you to practice reacting faster. And it's not like I'm biased or anything, but I think it's a pretty good map. Anyway, if we look back at what the pros are actually doing, it's not that they aren't playing safe, it's just that what's safe for them is much more aggressive than what would be safe for you. Whether that be your reaction time, crosshair placement, movement, whatever is lacking. If you want to drop higher kill games, your goal in practice should be to move that line between safe and dangerous further and further up. I'll leave the links to those on screen. And no leaks, but I might be dropping a new UAFM map in a couple weeks. Just saying. Either way.
Hey, it's me, your skin. This acne craves a powerful cleanse. New CeraVe Acne Wash treats.
Fortnite is an incredibly complex game, so nobody improves without picking up some bad habits along the way. You'll be able to get away with it for a while, but then at some point you'll notice that it's your bad habits that are holding you back from progressing. But when trying to fix the habits, people waste their time because they don't know how to break habits or even how habits form in the first place. So here's how to actually change your bad habits. The first thing you need to understand is that you can't separate your habits into good and bad. All of your habits were useful at some point, which is why you developed them. It's just that some of them became maladaptive as you improve and play against better players. For example, hopping in boxes for 50-50. If that's a habit you have, it's because most of the time it would work for you. If the opponents aren't that good, then 95% of the time they don't hit hard and you're rewarded for doing it. So naturally you'll do it again and again. The problem is that it becomes maladaptive as you get better and therefore play against better players. That 95% starts to go down to 70, then 60, then less than 50% against top players. Or take repeatedly reboxing the heal. Against worse players, they'll be too slow to pressure you so you can actually get your heals off, which is why it becomes such a strong habit. But against better players, they'll be able to constantly keep up the pressure and never give you enough time to heal regardless of how many boxes you make. If they're still on you after reboxing 2 or 3 times, they're still going to be on you after you rebox 5, 6, or even 7 times. If you want that time to heal, you're going to have to deal return damage or you'll just run out of mats eventually. Even in traditional sports like basketball, that one guy on the court that looks like he's falling over every time he shoots, guaranteed gets buckets. At some point, like if they were trying to go to the NBA or something, it would become a maladaptive habit, but until then, it's a useful habit for them. All of our habits, maladaptive or not, we depend on because they are a solution to a problem. The problem is the opponent trying to heal. The solution? Jump in the box and force 50-50. We're always going to try and solve the problem the most effective way we know how. So if we want to change the habit, either our current solution needs to stop being as effective, or we need a different solution to become more effective. And the only way our current solution is going to stop being as effective is if you play against better opponents. If you have this option, it's great, as you'll get punished for all your maladaptive habits, even the ones you don't recognize. But if you don't, the other option is to make a different solution more effective. So if you want to stop hopping in boxes, for example, you'll need to get good enough at pressuring that the opponent can't ever heal, regardless of how many boxes they make. Until you get that good at pressuring, you'll just revert back to hopping in. Same thing with reboxing over and over. The problem reboxing solves is allowing you to heal when you're on low HP. The solution that needs to eclipse it is shooting the opponent from safe peaks. If your peaks aren't good enough, you'll just get shot and die, leading you to keep reboxing the next time it happens. It's even for things like overpeaking. The problem that overpeaking solves is you shooting and breaking your own wall instead of hitting the enemy. So if you get your aim good enough that this isn't a problem, you'll naturally find yourself overpeaking less and less. And when I say either make the current solution less effective or another solution more effective, it's not strictly one or the other. Most of the time it's a combination of the two that's most effective. You probably don't have the connections to 1v1 pros whenever you feel like, but playing against opponents that actually challenge you is still better than 10-0ing people you already know you're better than. Another big help, and I can attest to this personally, is clipping and re-watching your mistakes. After you die, especially if it was from a dumb mistake, it's easy to just go, I already know what I messed up, I don't need to re-watch it, it was stupid. but that's exactly when you need to rewatch it. You're mentally trying to just go next game and forget about it as fast as possible, but dwelling on and remembering the mistake is what will remind you next time you're in that situation to not make the same mistake. Like if you only die 1 in 20 times from overpeaking, watching it over again and again when it does happen reinforces and makes it feel like it happens more often than it does. So the next time you're about to overpeak, the thought of what happened last time comes into your mind so you think twice. This still won't make your habits change overnight, but it will allow you to change much faster than without any intentionality at all. Thanks for watching, and a special thanks to the new members directly supporting me. It means a lot, and I actually have some ideas for how I can pump out videos faster than the 2 weeks it normally takes me. So I'll be working on that. Until then, farewell.
Alright, that's the stream.